All right, guys. What we're going to go over today is the modes of nutrition, okay, that organisms can essentially have. There's really, for the grand scheme, two. There are some very, very rare other forms of modes of nutrition, but we don't go into them because, again, they're so incredibly rare. All right, what we're going to focus on essentially now are the differences between plant and animal cells. We know we've talked about the similarities already, and we are going to label cell diagrams today, okay? But we want to focus on the differences today, and the differences have to do with how these two organisms acquire their energy. All right? Animals have to consume other organisms for food. Okay, whether those organisms are plants or whether those organisms, okay, are other animals, okay, whether those organisms are, well, maybe not other organisms, maybe it's the remains of other organisms, if it's a decomposer, okay, like a fungus or a bacterium or something like that, okay, it's still essentially getting its energy by eating other organisms, whether those organisms are actually dead or alive. Okay, everyone follow me there? All right. If you're a herbivore, then obviously you're preying directly on the plants. Okay, and yes, you are preying on plants. Okay, if you are a cow, grass is scared of you. Okay, you are a hunter of grass. It's just not hard to hunt grass because it's everywhere. All right, that's why herbivores tend to be kind of big and lazy. All right, especially cows. Everyone follow me on that one? Obviously, there are other animals that are active hunters that have to take down other organisms that are currently alive, okay, for food, and obviously that takes a lot of energy. So if you look at the behaviors of animals that actually have to hunt and kill other animals, okay, they're very methodical about how they do it. Because if you expend more energy than you will get from eating the thing you kill, was that a good investment? It's not. Okay? It's certainly not. You don't want to expend more energy catching something than you're going to get out of it by eating it. All right? So that's why you'll see, some things will, like coyotes and stuff, will kind of stalk, okay, their prey. They'll move slowly, not expending much energy, kind of lying in wait until they're very close and they can just pounce on something. All right? That's way better than, hey, there's a herd of wildebeests and I'm a cheetah. I'm just going to chase and chase and chase and chase and chase. Yes, cheetahs are really fast. Okay, but they're still smart, and they're going to crawl through the grass and sneak up on them, using way less energy than they would in an outright sprint with a wildebeest, okay, trying to take them down. All right, so you want to be, as an animal, cautious about how much energy you expend. Fish are a prime example. Okay, you don't see fish actively swimming around looking for things. They basically hide in little spots in lakes and rivers waiting for food to come to them. All right, because again, that's a better use of their energy. Right? Rather than fighting the current in a river all the time, they hide down in a place where they don't have to fight the current. Food floats by, they swim up, they grab it, they go back down into the place where there's less current. Everyone follow me there? Okay, so animals have to be much more cautious about that. Now, do plants have to adapt a little bit when they're acquiring energy? Certainly. Okay, if you're a plant that's maybe shaded out by something bigger, you have to adapt by trying to grow tissue, leaves, and things like that into areas where they might catch more sunlight, right? And later on in the unit, I'll show you some examples of plants that have really odd shapes because they have tried to get out from behind something or out from under something, okay, and get sunlight. So yes, plants do have to adapt and kind of not so much move, but okay, they have to adapt to their kinds of situations in order to maximize their energy acquisition. Okay, that includes growing roots to wetter areas where they can acquire more water, stuff like that. Okay, so we got to look and understand at how plant and animal cells are different, and we got to understand why these differences are present and necessary, and then correctly label plant and animal cells. Today I'll give you big color diagrams of plant and animal cells, okay, and we'll label those so that we can start on kind of anatomy of the cell. All right. So, modes of nutrition. Like we said, there's lots of subtle differences between plant and animal cells. Okay, obviously a plant cell has a cell wall where an animal cell doesn't. Okay, plant cells have chloroplasts, animal cells don't. Okay, animal cells have to have organelles that can digest food, where plants don't need that because plants don't eat food. Okay, yes, I know you're probably thinking the Venus flytrap eats food. Yes, it does. But it has special structures that are not a cellular level, okay, that secrete essentially enzymes to break down the fly, okay, that it eats, but they don't have the cellular structures. They just, okay, absorb those nutrients differently. All right, so the different modes of nutrition is where the biggest differences occur. So yes, obviously we've got predators, okay, animals that eat other organisms, and then we've got plants. Now, for this tomato plant or whatever this is, okay, obviously the source of energy is the sun, right? Which means that the source of energy for you and I is also what? The sun, indirectly. Okay, indirectly, our source of energy is the sun, because whether you're eating plants or whether you're eating animals, the energy you're getting came from the sun, right? In fact, all energy that we use on Earth originally comes from the sun. Okay? Your car is solar powered. Indirectly. The fossil fuels you're burning were plants about 500 million years ago. So really all you're doing is using solar energy. Next time an environmentalist gets in your face, you can tell them that. See what they say. Okay, it's not really true, but indirectly that energy came from the sun at one point. Okay, it was a long time ago, but yeah, it came from the sun at one time. Okay, forests of plants made coal and aquatic organisms. Okay, in the shallow ocean that used to cover most of Alberta. Okay, were photosynthetic, and when they died and deposited down, they created oil and gas deposits. All right, so yes, the energy that you burn in your car was once sunlight. Okay, a very, very long time ago. All right, so we got solar energy coming in, okay? And the plants also require two other resources. Not only do they require sunlight, they require carbon dioxide and water. All right? So what happens in photosynthesis is this. You have, okay, CO2 and water, okay? And through the process of photosynthesis, so with light being added in here as a source of energy, we get this, C6, H12, O6, and oxygen gas. That is the chemical equation for photosynthesis. Plants take carbon dioxide and water, and with light as an energy source, cause this kind of reaction to occur. Okay? Now, this is not one of the 5 reaction types that we went over, okay? Because obviously this reaction does not happen spontaneously. Light is the source of energy that powers this reaction. Okay? You have to put energy in for this reaction to work. All right? And so they get this as their source of fuel. Okay? This stuff here is glucose. It is chemical energy for living organisms, plant or animal. Okay? All plants, all animals use that as their source of energy. All right? How they get to it is different. Obviously, plants build it directly. Animals, well, we got to break down whatever we eat into simpler forms. One of those forms being glucose. All right. So if you eat, let's say, plant material, you're going to be breaking down some of the material in the plant, the starches and things like that, into glucose. All right. If you eat the leafy parts of plants, do you get a lot of energy out of those? No, we don't, okay? Because we don't have the enzymes capable of breaking down cellulose, which is what plants are made out of, okay, into energy. Herbivores do, right? That's why cows and moose and deer and whatever else can eat plants directly and get energy from it, okay? But how is their digestive system different? Anyone know? No one lives on a farm? Okay, cows, well, herbivores in general, have a 4-chambered stomach. All right. So when they eat the grass goes in, okay, and it gets partially digested, all right, and then they actually spit it up a little bit, okay, and they chew it a second time. It's called chewing their cud. If you've ever seen a cow, it looks like he's drooling real bad. Okay, that's what he's doing. Cows have the worst breath too. Okay, because it's basically silage that they puke up. It's like rotten grass. Okay, they puke it up, they chew it again, and they swallow it, and then it goes through the other 2 chambers of the stomach, and then out the back end is manure. Okay, so they get energy from it because they have a different type of digestive system, different enzymes capable of breaking it down. We can't. All right, that's why if you're trying to lose weight, they often tell you, well, eat lots of like salads and green vegetables and things like that because they can make you feel full, but you don't get a lot of energy out of them. In fact, if you eat celery, it takes more energy to eat celery than you get out of it. All right? Because what's celery? Mostly water. Okay, it's water and cellulose, which you can't break down anyway. That's why it's really stringy and chewy. Okay, so you can't really get much out of that. If you're certain types of animals, then yes, you can. For us, no. We got to consume either the sugary parts of plants, like fruit, okay, or the starchy parts of plants, like roots, okay, where we do have the ability to break those parts down for energy. So if you're eating potatoes, as an example, okay, potatoes are very, very starchy. Okay, starches are basically sugars that are bonded together in a long chain. All right, so starchy foods have lots of energy in them. So potatoes are a high energy food. Okay, beets would also be a high energy food. Any of those kind of, like turnips and things like that. Okay, they're all very starchy. And obviously if you're eating fruits, fruits are just full of sugar. All right, good sugar, but they're full of sugar. All right, why are they full of sugar? Anybody know? Why would a plant put all that energy into its fruit? Right. Okay. Fruit is designed to disperse seeds. Okay. Most plants want their fruit to be eaten. All right. In fact, there are some plants whose seeds will not germinate unless they have gone through the digestive tract of an animal and had the coating on the seeds taken off by their digestive enzymes and stuff. Okay? And then, of course, when an animal eats the seeds, they deposit the seeds in a nutrient-rich medium on the ground. Yeah, you all know what I mean. Okay? Usually you don't digest seeds, okay? You just physically can't digest them. If you ate watermelon and ate the seeds, they're going to come out of you pretty much unchanged. I don't mean to go looking for them, okay? I'm just telling you, all right? You don't have to go looking for them. But seeds you generally don't digest, all right? So things to think about, right, is what kind of things are sources of energy for different types of animals. All right, so we take in the carbon dioxide, and as a result of producing this, essentially what happens is the oxygen that gets produced by a plant, most people think it comes off of carbon dioxide, but it actually comes off of water. Okay? Water gets split, okay, and the oxygen that's on carbon dioxide usually goes into the glucose. Okay? The oxygen that's released from the water becomes the oxygen gas that we breathe. All right, so yes, plants produce the oxygen gas that we require to live. Okay. Animals are what we call chemo heterotrophs. Okay? So, chemo means essentially chemicals or organic material, right? Hetero means other. So in other words, the chemicals from other organisms, okay? And troph means feeder. Just like the other kind of trough is a feeder. But it's spelt this way, right? I think it's spelt that way. Is it a PH or a GH? I don't know. I'm not an English guy. Okay, so chemical other feeder, chemo heterotroph. You got to consume other organisms for food. Okay, so they consume chemicals from other organisms to make energy. Their cells contain these things, lysosomes. Lysosome is like the stomach of the cell. It contains digestive enzymes, and those digestive enzymes can break down food. All right, there's wide variety of chemo heterotrophs. Okay, very wide variety. Some bacteria are chemo heterotrophs. Okay, and they consume other organisms for food. Okay, worms are another example. Okay, they eat the stuff, the organic material that's in dirt. Okay, and it goes through their digestive tract. Okay, so it goes through the crop and the gizzard, and there's one other thing in there. Anyway, it's like their stomach. Okay, it goes through there, goes into their long intestine that goes all the way back. Okay, comes out the end. Okay, fungus. Okay, fungi are chemo heterotrophs. They're not plants. They don't carry out photosynthesis. They actually consume other organisms for food. Most of the time, those organisms are already dead. Right? They grow on decaying plant material, decaying animals. They even grow on living animals sometimes. Okay, if you have dandruff, dandruff is caused by a fungus growing on your head. How many of you right now are fighting the urge to scratch your scalp after that? Yeah, you know you are. Okay, there's a fungus that grows naturally on your scalp. It's always there. Okay, yeah, if you shampoo your hair regularly, you keep the effects of it down. Okay, the effects of it are is if this fungus is getting kind of out of control, it will cause your skin to exfoliate, and you get little flakes of skin, dandruff, okay, in your hair. That same process happens all over your body, okay, but the fungus tends to grow a little bit more on your head because, you know, moisture stays in there. It's protected from dryness by your hair. It's a nice environment for it to grow in. Or on your feet, in the form of athlete's foot. Athlete's foot is a fungus. Okay? The reason it itches, it's eating you. Okay? Athlete's foot is eating your feet. All right? What it does is, if this is your foot, okay, the athlete's foot fungus puts these things down called hyphae. They look like roots under a microscope, but they're not. Okay? And what they do is they secrete digestive enzymes outside of the hyphae. And the digestive enzymes eat your cells. Okay? And then they absorb the material that they've digested back in. So they actually digest their food outside of their body and then reabsorb. We do the opposite. Okay? We eat stuff and it gets digested inside of our body. But that's what causes the itching sensation, okay, is the fact that these fungus are digesting your tissue on your feet. All right? And of course, your feet inside of your shoes and socks, nice and warm, dark, moist, perfect breeding environment for fungus. Okay? And now you're all going, you're trying to scratch your feet, right? You're all thinking about it. All right. And then the obvious type of Chemo Heterotroph, the top predators that hunt down things and eat them up. All right? Okay, questions on that? So, animal cells have to be somewhat plastic. Okay, and by plastic, I mean like malleable. They can change their shape easily. Why is that important? Because animals are mobile. We have to be able to move around, chase our food down, okay, things like that. You can't do that if your cells have a rigid shape. We need our cells to stretch and bend and twist and do all kinds of things. So having a cell wall is not very good for us. That's why we don't have one. All of our cells just have the outer membrane, which is quite strong. Okay, they also will have what's called a cytoskeleton, which is a series of fibers and things like that that run throughout the cell and are basically attached to the insides of the cell membrane from both sides. It's essentially like having the sides tied off with a bungee cord. All right, so when the cell starts to stretch, it can stretch only so far before those cords will pull back to keep the cell from rupturing. All right, so it's a cytoskeleton. It's this structure that holds the cell together. Okay, so they have those fibrous materials. Okay, so cells often contain fibrous materials that allow the cell to change shape. Okay, and only a flexible outer membrane as a border. Okay, and inside, the thing that you will see inside of animals but not inside of plants are these two things: peroxisomes and lysosomes. Okay, peroxisomes contain digestive enzymes. The lysosomes contain the same digestive enzymes but also food. So the lysosomes is where the actual digestion is going on. Peroxisomes are essentially waiting for food to come to them. Okay, there's one other structure that's inside an animal cell that's not inside a plant cell. We'll talk about it in a little while. Okay, centrioles. And centrioles help with cell division. Okay, because an animal's cell shape is very flexible, during cell division, the DNA, the cellular material, your chromosomes, have to be pulled to each side of the cell when the cell is about to divide. Just in case during cell division the cell's shape were to change, if they weren't pulled to one side, it's possible that one cell would get more DNA than it's supposed to, and the other side would get too little, and both would die. All right, so the centrioles essentially ensure that this goes on. For some reason, those are not labeled on that particular picture of the cell. All right, plants and all photosynthetic organisms, including like algae and stuff like that, okay, are called photoautotrophs. Photo means light, okay. Auto means self. Trophs, feeder. Okay, so these are organisms that feed themselves with light. Now, the big thing about this is what we call the carbon cycle. And that's what you see in this diagram right here. Okay, plants, okay, produce oxygen and organic compounds like sugar, okay, and like we said, oxygen. These are both consumed by chemo heterotrophs, animals, all right. And when we digest those things, what do we produce? CO2 and water. What do plants need? CO2 and water. This is the carbon cycle. Okay, it's been rolling along happily for billions of years on Earth. Okay, and it is essentially what keeps things running. Okay, carbon has to cycle. Everything contains carbon, and carbon's kind of that basic thing that all organisms are made out of. Our fuels are made out of. Okay, those kind of things. All right, now the things that plant cells have to do this. The big one, the chloroplast. Okay, this is what a chloroplast looks like. Okay, actually this is what it looks like under an electron microscope, so greatly enlarged. To give you some idea, the stuff you're going to look at tomorrow is about 100 micrometers. Would be about the smallest one. The euglena might be about 80 micrometers, and they're going to look really, really small. Okay, that's 1 micrometer, that little bar. Okay, so you imagine a chloroplast is what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 micrometers across. Okay, they're pretty small. That said, you'll still be able to see them when we look at the plant cell. Okay, there'll be little green dots inside of the plant cells when we look at them. All right, but this is essentially what they are, what they sort of look like. They have a double membrane, so they have 2 membranes on them. Okay, and inside are these things that look kind of like coins stacked on top of each other, called thylakoids. You're not going to need to know that, but that's what they're called. Okay, and inside the thylakoid is where photosynthesis occurs. That's where chlorophyll is, okay, and the other pigments that can capture light energy and turn carbon dioxide into water. All right, the other big thing: stiff cell walls and large water vacuoles. These are necessary because plants have to support themselves and they don't have bones. Okay, so a plant supports itself mostly with water and cell walls. Okay, now unfortunately I watered my plants last week and none of them are wilty. Usually I forget to water them, and then I always have a wilted plant to show people when I get to this point. But unfortunately, all my plants look healthy for once. So if you've ever seen a wilted plant, okay, you know what it looks like. You haven't watered a plant for a while, it kind of gets limp and kind of falls over. The leaves kind of get soft. Okay, the reason for that is that the water vacuole, this thing here, okay, inside of the cell is beginning to drain. All right, the water vacuole supports the shape of the cell by pushing everything in the cell against the cell wall with water pressure. All right, it would be like if you had a water balloon, okay, and you'd only filled it up a little bit. You can still change its shape very easily, but if you fill it up to the point where it's about to burst, it's quite a bit more rigid. Isn't that what I'm talking about? That's what we call, okay, turgor pressure. Okay, and turgor pressure is what holds up a cell. The cell walls on their own are not strong enough to do this job, but in cooperation with the pressure from inside, they are. Okay, everybody follow me there? It would be like a tire without air. All right, if you just have a tire that's got no air in it, does it support the car or your bike or whatever? All right, it just crushes down. Sure, rubber is, you know, fairly sturdy, but without air pressure from within, it isn't rigid. Okay, well, the cell wall, or the plant cell, sorry, is the same. Without the water pressure from within, there's not the cell wall is not strong enough on its own, and the plant tips. Okay, so it's really important that they have those because plants need to remain upright. Remaining upright allows them to compete with each other for sunlight. The taller you are as a plant, generally, the better you do. All right, so we got water vacuole. That's a difference. Helps support the cell. Cell wall, again, helps support the cell and the plant as a whole. Okay, the chloroplasts are the photosynthetic organelles of the cell. Okay, so sorry, chloroplasts, okay, stiff cell walls and large water vacuoles. Now, they got lots of similarities. We talked about those previously. Okay, obviously they all have a nucleolus. That's the little dark spot in the middle of the nucleus. Okay, they have a nucleus itself. Okay, they both have that. All right, they've got rough endoplasmic reticulum. Okay, that's that stuff in here. They've got smooth endoplasmic reticulum. Okay, that's that stuff right there. They've got Golgi apparatus. Okay, that thing there. And they've got mitochondria. Okay, mitochondria there. All right, so lots and lots of similarities. Also, this fluid that fills up the cell, it's not filled with air, by the way, okay, is called cytoplasm. Okay, and it's just a fluid medium that fills up the cell. Okay, those centrioles I was telling you about previously that only the animal cells have are right there. That's those two things. Okay, so lots of similarities. All right, I want you guys to answer those questions here. Okay, you have to write them down because you don't have them. Write down the questions. Okay, answer those questions. I'm going to go get your cell diagrams and we'll label those. All right, so what's the main reason for differences between plant and animal cells? 3 words. Oh, that screwed you up. Okay, maybe you explain to me what you were thinking. Okay. Exactly. That's the long way of saying modes of nutrition. Okay, 3 words. They're different because their modes of nutrition are different. How it is they get their glucose. Okay, how it is they get their chemical energy that runs the cells. All right, so what organelle supplies plants with energy? What process does it use? Chloroplasts, and it uses photosynthesis. Okay. What organelle supplies animal cells with energy? Lysosomes, right. They digest food, turn it into glucose, and then the glucose is used for energy. Okay. Arguably, you could also make an argument for both of these to be the mitochondria, which is the organelle that actually burns the sugar. Okay, but we're talking more about how we get to the sugar in this lesson. Okay, for number 4, transport within plant and animal cells is done in the same fashion. Why would this have been kept the same from an evolutionary standpoint when so many other things have been altered? Right, simple. Natural selection selects things that work, and that process works. Therefore, it keeps being used. Until something better comes along, we keep doing what we're doing. Okay. Number 5, the nutritional needs of plants and animals are very different. Which would have survived best in a primordial Earth that had very little oxygen or organic material available? Gwen. Right. In fact, they can produce the oxygen that they require in order to burn the sugar after they've produced it. So yes, the first organisms that would have survived on Earth would have been probably like blue-green algae, single-celled bacterial photosynthetic organisms would have been some of the most simple first organisms because they could have survived in those environments. Okay. All right. Let's look at the cells. Okay, so let's start right here with the little yellow gears, okay, or whatever they look like here. Okay, these are our centrioles. All right, the centrioles are those things that I told you earlier help the cell divide, okay, and make sure that all of the chromosomes get to the right side. We're going to talk about functions of stuff later. Okay, you don't have to write the functions on here. All right, this is just labeling. All right, but I'm just going to tell you what they do, and we'll go over it again later. All right, right here we see this little thing that looks empty, this little bubble. Okay, this is a peroxisome. Okay, peroxisome is a bubble that essentially contains digestive enzymes, right, but has not encountered any food particles. Right? A peroxisome that has encountered food particles looks like this, and this is a lysosome. Right? So once digestion is being undertaken, a peroxisome essentially becomes a lysosome. Okay? These both come from the Golgi apparatus. The Golgi apparatus is actually where the digestive enzymes are produced. Right? So they start in there. Okay, you can see here this little kind of faded band kind of looking thing here. Okay, these are microfibers. They're part of that cytoskeleton, okay, I told you about before, that helps to support the cell. All right, and you see down here something similar, except they're obviously thicker, and if you look on the edges, they actually look like tubes. Well, that's because they are microtubules. and they serve the same function. They're part of the cytoskeleton, okay, that supports the cell. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference, okay? And so if you write microfibers, microfilaments, or microtubules for anything that looks like either of those, I'll accept it, because sometimes it's really hard to tell the difference. And they all, since they're all part of the cytoskeleton, they all essentially do the same thing. All right, this thing right up here, mitochondria. Okay, and the mitochondria is that organelle that burns the glucose and releases its energy in the form of ATP, okay, and that's actually what your cell uses to do stuff. All right, and you can see that it has a double membrane. It's very, very thick. That's because the process of breaking down glucose releases a lot of heat, and the rest of the cell actually has to be insulated from that process. All right, for some reason, animal cells always get drawn with this thing on them. Almost none of your cells, if you're a girl, none of your cells have these. Okay? If you're a guy, there's only one set of cells in your body that contain them. Sperm. Okay? It's called a flagella. I don't know why animal cells always get labeled with one, but you can almost never find an animal cell that doesn't have this on it for some reason on a diagram, even though basically no cells contain them. Right? But it always seems to have a flagella drawn on for whatever reason. Okay? All right. This line here that's headed towards the big purple thing is pointing at the outside of the big purple thing. Okay? This is the nuclear membrane. Okay? The outer covering to anything cellular is a membrane. Okay, the line just below that is pointing into the middle of the big purple thing. The big purple thing is the nucleus. Okay. Inside of the nucleus, there's always a kind of a central darkened area inside of the nucleus, and that is the nucleolus. Spelling counts between nucleus and nucleolus, okay? Because I oftentimes have people who aren't sure, and they'll write on like a quiz or an exam, nucleolus, hoping that I'll just think they spelled it wrong, even though it really means they didn't know which one was which. Yeah, if you don't spell those two right, unfortunately, they're going to be wrong, because you have to tell me you know for sure which one's which. Okay, the nucleolus has actually a pretty important job. It controls the synthesis of proteins within the cell. So anytime your cell needs to make something, okay, it's what finds the section of DNA that codes for that and sends out the blueprints, essentially, okay, for that. We'll talk about the process of protein synthesis later, but that's the thing that essentially controls it. All right, you see here these little lines here. It forks off, and it's getting it's showing these little dots here as well as these little dots that are on this blue stuff. These are ribosomes, and the ribosomes work with the nucleolus. The ribosomes are actually the things that make protein. They're protein factories. Yeah. And you can see there's lots of them. They're everywhere. Your cells are always making proteins. Okay? Proteins are used for all kinds of things. Yes, they're used for building muscle and tissue and things like that, but they're also hormones are proteins. Digestive enzymes are proteins. Okay? All those kinds of things are all produced, okay, in there. All right, this line here is going to the blue stuff with the ribosomes on it. That is the rough endoplasmic reticulum. You can abbreviate that rough ER. Because there's two types of endoplasmic reticulum. The rough stuff that's got ribosomes on it, and its job is simply to transport the proteins that are produced there. Okay? And the smooth stuff. All right, so you can see that this line down here at the very bottom is pointing at the smooth ER. The smooth ER does lots of things. Okay? Produces all kinds of materials and repairs membranes and detoxifies poisons. It's kind of like the liver, okay, of the cell. All right, this line here is pointing at the outer part of the cell, which would be the cell membrane. Right, remember, animal cells don't have a cell wall. All right, and then there's this big orange deal, okay, and that is the Golgi apparatus. That's the garbage man of the cell. Okay, it processes waste materials, puts them in a bubble, okay, called a vesicle, and that vesicle goes to the membrane, where it merges with the membrane and essentially pops, and the material, the waste material, goes outside of the cell. Right? One thing that's not labeled on here for some reason, okay, the fluid that fills up the cell is called the cytoplasm. All right, that's all we'll get to today. Bell's going to go here right away. Tomorrow we will do the plant cell. Fortunately, most of the structures are the same. What do you suppose Thursday's quiz will be on? Cells, right. So you might want to start reviewing that a little bit.